Welcome to Student Connections, where students connect with their community.
Hi, welcome to M6, your hometown station. I'm Caitlin Herring, here interviewing Susan Bennett from the Port Huron Museum. Nice. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me here.
You're very welcome. So, what's the new exhibit at the Port Huron Museum?
Well, this has been quite a labor of love, and we just a couple weeks ago opened The Storm of 1913 Remembered.
Yeah, I've heard about that when we went to Free College Day and they had a class. But
Yes, we did. Yes, we did indeed. Well, the storm is very significant to our part of the world. It was the worst ever, the worst before or since storm that ever happened on the Great Lakes. And because of those 4 days in November, 100 years ago, 19 ships were severely damaged and over 250 plus sailors were lost in a single 4-day storm.
What were the ships that were lost? I don't know.
Well, there were all kinds. It was a very different time back then. 100 years ago, there were something like 6,000 or 7,000 ships a year that would go right through the river and up under the Blue Water Bridge. Of course, it wasn't there yet, but up into the lake. And they were very different ships from what we see today. For instance, most of them were 300, 400, 500 feet long versus the 1,000-foot Leviathans. So there were a lot of them. Trucking wasn't as important because the automobile hadn't been on the road very long. So there were a lot of reasons there was a lot of shipping. And because of the technology of the day, this was one of those November witch storms that kind of creeps up on you. And it certainly did. It caught many people unaware, and we'll never really know the extent of the damage.
So back to the exhibit. What types of artifacts are included?
Well, there's all kinds of stuff. Of course, we've tried to narrow it down to a few different key parts of the year of 1913. And we start with the 1913 streetscape. And we actually were able to find businesses in our immediate area who were in business in 1913, and they went into their archives as we went into our collection, and we found different things to tell the story of their businesses 100 years ago. There's a dentist office, there's a photography studio, and there's a prominent dry cleaner, and we were actually able to find a 1900 copper washing machine in our archives, so that they would have used in a laundry at the time. So all of those kind of things you can see.
So how did you guys research the facts around the storm?
Well, we were very fortunate. We have a lot of local experts who found this story fascinating. We had contact with many famous authors, historians, educators, all kinds of people that were interested in the story. And you don't have a 100th anniversary of anything to celebrate very often. So this was kind of a natural. There was a gentleman by the name of David Brown who wrote maybe the definitive story on the storm of 1913 called White Hurricane. And we used a lot of things out of his books as well as some others to double check our facts and make sure what we were showing was correct.
That's really awesome. About how many people on your staff were involved in putting this whole thing
together? Well, we had
together?
about 15 people that were involved in the planning meetings, and those were people from all over the community. We actually have a very small staff. We have 5 full-time people at the museum, and it was really on the shoulders of 3 people with maybe 4 or 5 different volunteers. And we actually built it from the ground up. We started with a blank room and ended up a month later with an exhibit.
Did you have any divers or anybody else that?
We certainly did. I'm glad you asked, in fact. We have a wonderful relationship with Wayne Brusate, and he is the gentleman that owns Commercial Diving and out on Wadhams Road, and does a lot of work for the Edison ships and all this underwater work. But he's also a historian in his own right. And in 1986, he was looking for a lost tugboat up between Lexington and Port Sanilac, and he actually found one of the 1913 ships that had been missing for 76 years. Wow. And that ship was called the Regina. By the way, there are still 3 ships missing that they have yet to find 100 years later.
Right. How else, like, other than like M6, how else are you guys like advertising the new stuff?
Well, we've been very fortunate. We've got a relationship with Pure Michigan, so we're online. We've had wonderful coverage from local media, both radio and the newspaper has been very good to us. The Voice has been in. We had TV 20 out of Detroit come up a couple weeks ago, and he filmed a segment on it. And again, we're coming up on the anniversary. The actual anniversary is the 7th through the 10th of November. So I think as we get even closer to those dates, it'll be more important.
I heard you guys like were doing something at McMorran for it. Like, how did the show work for that?
We actually did something at McMorran. It was the week after we opened, and we had a one-day Chautauqua. Do you know what a Chautauqua is?
No, I'm not.
That's okay. I didn't know until 6 months ago either. But back around the turn of the century, there were very popular fairs that would go from community to community, and that's how you found out about trends in music, fashion, food, history, politics, religion, and they were like a little tent revival. And we actually took that idea from a newspaper we found that was from 1913, where they had a very large Chautauqua in Pine Grove Park. So what we took the Chautauqua idea, and we had 14 presenters, and those again included historians, we had meteorologists, we had authors of many of the books that we carry, and they all came together and did a 1-hour presentation in one day. So it was 2 going at a time, and we ended the evening with a concert by a pretty well-known Great Lakes historian and songwriter.
Wow.
It was very, very good. We had wonderful response to it. And luckily, many of those people are coming back for programs on future Saturdays at the museum, so we were able to double the exposure there.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. I'm kind of sad I missed it.
I'm sad you missed it too, because you would have been just tired of the 1913 storm after those 12 hours, but you would have known a lot more about it and had real sense of history and community for our area.
Yeah. So how long is the exhibit going to be?
The exhibit runs until January 14th, so we'll be there through the holidays. And again, it was a labor of love. It took over 18 months of planning to put it together, and I think it's real worth it. And we've adopted the little tagline of "It's our story to tell." So much of what happened in the storm of 1913 was right here off our shores. Nearly every one of the boats lost went right up the St. Clair River past Marysville, one way or the other. And there's the story, the individual stories, and the histories that we have are fascinating, and we try to tell those in the best possible light.
Was there any dedications for the ceremony for like the new like maritime thing that you guys got?
Well, we'll talk about that. That's a good idea. Believe it or not, nowhere in St. Clair County is there a sailor's memorial. Now, there is a 1913 memorial up near Port Sanilac, which is one of those green state bronze plaques, the state historical markers, but you can only have one per event. So we decided to combine the two, and I earlier mentioned Wayne Brusate, who was a very quiet man, but he's very thoughtful, and this is one of his pet projects. So he has donated a marine artifact that will be engraved on each side, and one side will be a general sailor's memorial, and the other side will be 1913 specific. So that is going to be dedicated under the Blue Water Bridge on the Flag Plaza on the afternoon of November 9th, which is the 100th anniversary of the worst of the storm.
Well, that sounds very interesting.
It is interesting. It's our story to tell.
Yeah. Well, we have to go to a break, so we'll be back with more right after this.
According to the National Crime Victimization Survey, nearly 2/3 of sexual assaults occur at night. However, this number can be reduced by learning some easy-to-follow nighttime safety tips. Keep a cell phone, flashlight, and some form of ID on you at all times, especially at night, but don't carry a lot of money or valuables. If you're walking or running, plan your route and let others know where you're going. Try your best not to go out alone. Avoid unpopulated or poorly lit areas. If you feel like you're being followed, find a well-populated area or go into a public building. Park in a well-lit area. If you notice any suspicious activity, call the police and find a safe place immediately. By following these rules, your nighttime travels can be safe and enjoyable.
that thing getting closer? Look how high that thing's going. Look out there, look at the debris.
Give me the camera.
No, just drive, I've got it.
Zoom in, zoom in.
I can't believe this is happening.
Oh, the size of that thing.
It's everywhere.
Are you getting this?
Yeah, I've got it. What was that?
It's the National Guard.
How'd they get here so fast?
I don't know.
Pull over, pull over.
Do you have what it takes to head into the heart of the storm? Check out NationalGuard.com.
Welcome back to M6. Right now we're talking about the storm of 1913 with Mrs. Bennett from the Port Huron Museum.
Yes, Katie, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I see you brought in some books today.
I did. We earlier talked about what was our inspiration, what was, how did we find all this information, and these are just a couple of the books that we used, and more importantly, that we have a relationship now with the authors of these books. So one of the things that's interesting about the storm is there's lots of different stories and lots of different, I should say, controversies. What happened to these ships? If I may, the Wexford is a very famous wreck that was just found in 1994, which is just amazing. With all of the technology we've had for a while, that they couldn't find this ship. But we're good friends with the author. In fact, he'll be in Port Huron this weekend to do another program. The Wexford it's a fascinating story, and that went down. It was actually during the storm and was found just not even a mile offshore in southeast Ontario, near the city of Goderich. The other storm, Great Lakes Storm, also by Paul Carroll. That is an interesting book too, because it's the perspective of the whole storm and the inquest and all of those things from the Canadian point of view. And for ship aficionados and for historians, at that time, the Canadian Coast Guard had a different system of warning and different flags than the Americans did. And that may not mean a lot if you're way up into Lake Huron, but when you're a quarter of a mile away from Canada and looking for storm warnings, that makes a big difference, and it did. So to hear their side of the story, and of course Canada is important to the story too, because after the storm was over, all the prevailing winds were blowing west to east. And that meant that a lot of the flotsam and sadly the bodies and the wreckage all came up on those shores.
Yeah. Out of these three books, like, which one's your favorite? Or?
Well, the first one I ever read was White Hurricane, and I wasn't even in the museum business, and I found it in an airport gift shop, and it said Great Lakes, and I bought it, and I just couldn't even pull my mug out of the book for 2 days. I had to finish it. And the gentleman who wrote it, David Brown, he's a little eccentric, but he stands by his stories, and he did an awful lot of research. And when he did that in 2004, believe it or not, there were still some crewmen that were alive. And now we're 10 years later, and the real survivors, there's no one to talk to anymore. So we have to get those stories down whenever we have the opportunity. But White Hurricane, I think, it takes you through the 4 days. And where the other two are more specific to different ships and different locations, that gives the greatest overall view.
Yeah, I'll be sure to check that one out. I hope they have it at the library.
They have it, and we have it at the museum. Imagine.
Wow, that's awesome.
And he'll be back on November 16th, David Brown, to do a presentation and a book signing.
Cool. Yeah, that should be really exciting. I hope the viewers check it out too, because it's really interesting.
It is interesting.
I know this was a really big tragedy. Did it cause any changes the way?
It absolutely did. It absolutely did. The way weather was reported changed because a lot of the weather reports were coming out of Washington D.C. or out of Montreal, and they sometimes didn't match. Some people think that one of the reasons for all of the losses were that there were no radios. Well, there actually were radios that the shipmasters themselves were hesitant to use because they thought it was another way for the home office to keep track of them. And had they had those radios, it would have been, perhaps lives would have been saved. It was one of those once in 100-year you hear storms where the two things collided, and what made it our story and our storm was it was all over Lake Huron. Affected all the Great Lakes, but it was based in Lake Huron. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What do the guests think of the exhibit?
Well, we have had such a wonderful month of attendance as well as people that are involved. We're getting people from all over. I mentioned the Pure Michigan website. I think that's bringing people to town. We have bought billboards. We've done all kinds of things to promote this because it is once in a lifetime event. And the response has been so great that we added an extra day to our week. And we also added one evening. So on Tuesdays, we're going to be open 11 to 8. So we'll have evening hours for people that haven't been able to get there any other time. So we're open every day except Monday.
All right, yeah. I'll have to get my parents to come to that.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Bring your closest 50 friends.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I'll try. All right, well, we have to go to a break again, so we will be back with more right after this.
Each year, over 3.2 million students are victims of bullying, including 1 in 7 students, grades kindergarten through 12th grade, are either a bully or the person being victimized. In addition, 56% of students have personally witnessed some type of bullying at school. We all know someone who has been a bully, affected by bullying, or the people who are witnesses. If you are the bully, stop it. If you are the victim, tell someone, anyone. Just get help and stay strong. If you are the witness, take some action. We all need to take part to make a stand to eliminate bullying. With everyone's help, together we can.
You may be eligible for a credit on your electric bill if you experience lengthy or frequent service outages. To request the $25 credit, contact your electricity provider. For more information about the credit and tips for surviving power outages, call the Michigan Public Service Commission at 1-800-292-9555 or visit their website at michigan.gov/MPSC and click on Consumer Information. A public service message from the Michigan Public Service Commission.
Welcome back to M6. I'm here with Mrs. Bennett from the Port Huron Museum. Well, we're going to switch from 1913 over to the Port Huron Lighthouse. So, where is the lighthouse, and how did the museum get a hold of it?
The lighthouse is actually, 1913 is related because one of the first lighthouses built in the state was in Fort Gratiot, or the Fort Gratiot Lighthouse, which is just north of the Blue Water Bridge where the river and the lake meet. And it was actually put up the current structure was put up in 1829, which makes it Michigan's oldest lighthouse. But prior to that, in 1814, directly under the Blue Water Bridge, or where the bridge sits now, there was another lighthouse. And unfortunately, it wasn't built very well and fell apart within 2 years. And its location made it hard for ships out in the lake to see it. So they moved it just a little bit north, which is the location of the Fort Gratiot Light Station today.
Why is it so important to our area?
Well, because it actually is still a working aid to navigation. There are different Coast Guard machines up there, as well as NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They have equipment up there that registers wind speed and ship passages and all of those things, and they're all on top of the lighthouse. So that is broadcast all over the world for people to make forecasts, and for not only freighters and commercial traffic, but for recreational boaters as well. And those forecasts are important.
Wow, that's really awesome. I never knew all that was
They're all is there. And it was a working Coast Guard station until 2010, so that wasn't very long ago.
So, I know it's older, but what types of renovations have occurred over its history?
Well, as I mentioned, it was a Coast Guard station. So up until 2010, there were people actually living in it as their barracks, even though there was the new Coast Guard station just directly to the south of it that opened in 2004. But our renovations, basically all we have done in the last couple of years is the tower. The tower was completely rebuilt. There were 30,000 bricks that were put back on the tower because after all of these years it had suffered some damage at 180 years old. So that was a very exciting renovation. We've renovated the fog signal building, which back in the day there were actual megaphone type things that warned ships of fog.
Cool.
That's been redone, and right now it's our gift shop. But the entire thing is so unusual in the lighthouse world. First of all, it's not at the end of the pier, and it's here it is a world away, but it's 6 blocks from a Rite Aid. It's a 5-acre campus with 7 outbuildings, the oldest of which is the tower, and the newest of which is a garage built in the 1970s. But the majority of it was put together, with the exception of the tower, in the 1930s.
Wow. Is it hard to do renovations?
It's very difficult to do renovations, but first let me just go back for a minute. The Port Huron Museum actually has the operating contract with St. Clair County for the lighthouse, so it isn't ours. In 2011, the federal government deeded the Fort Gratiot Light Station property, which is 5 acres and all its buildings, to St. Clair County to use as a park. So they're actually the park owners. And we just have a contract with them to operate the exhibits, the tours, and the gift shop. And we've been doing that for the last we just finished our second season. So the renovations were part of that. We have a very active group called the Friends of the Fort Gratiot Light who do fundraisers, because many of the grants come either from the federal or the state level. They need to have local grant matches. And to this point, the Friends of the Fort Gratiot Light have raised almost $100,000 in the last several years for those grant matches, because we're looking at buildings that a roof is $200,000. So being a historical site, we've got very specific ways that we can do these renovations, and they must be historically accurate down to the color of the paint inside.
So are there overnight tours at the lighthouse?
There are overnight. Well, they're not tours, actually. They're more of an event. You arrive at 6 p.m. and you leave the next morning at 9 p.m. But the old duplex building will actually sleep 40 people. And we had new bunk beds installed a year ago. And it's a terrific thing for family reunions. We've had wedding parties stay there. Lots and lots of Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts, church groups. It can be used for just about anything. But it's a fun night and a beautiful place to wake up.
Yeah, I know some other lighthouses, they're haunted. Is there any stuff like that happen at ours?
Yes. I say that because it's all subject to personal interpretation, but we have a relationship with the Motor City Ghost Hunters. And they come up a couple times a year and they do a 3 or 4 hour investigation, and then they present their findings. And that's something that anybody who wants to join them can go along on their tour. And they've got all kinds of electronic equipment and to feel cold spots and lights, and there have been truly some very bizarre things happen.
What's usually the cost for one of the tours?
A regular tour is $7. It takes about 45 minutes. You get to go in all the buildings, and then if you wish, you can take the 92 steps to the top and go outside on the little deck up there, and the view of the blue is like nothing you've ever seen before. It's stunning. And we're actually going to add this Christmas season, we're going to do candlelight tours every Saturday night. So we'll have lanterns, and you can go up there, bring your camera. There'll be over 1,000 lights on the tower itself, so it will be decorated for Christmas, and we're open through December 15th.
That'll be so exciting.
It is exciting, and it's a wonderful piece of our history. When you're standing there on that beautiful, pristine beach looking at our blue water, it's hard to believe that they're, as I mentioned, a Rite Aid just 6 blocks away. But by the same token, you don't have to hike 2 miles out into the woods to get to the lighthouse.
Yeah. I think I read in the paper somewhere that there was a sandcastle event at the lighthouse.
Last year was our very first one, and it was Michigan's first professional sand sculpting competition.
Wow.
And it was called Sandfest. And it was held over 4th of July weekend, and 5 amateurs and 5 professional sand sculptors came, and over a period of a couple days created these most amazing sand sculptures. And they all used 15 tons of sand, which really isn't as much as you might think. But most of them were anywhere from 6 or 8 feet wide to 8 to 12 feet high. And it was just amazing work.
What other things were scheduled at the Sandfest? Or?
Well, we had demonstrations. We had learned how to sculpt. We had quicksand, which was very fun. It took two of the professionals, and the audience screamed out a topic, and they had 10 minutes to create it. And for that, they got master points. And so you root for whoever you'd like, and it was a very exciting competition. And I know my staff and I, we were all inclined, so we joined the amateur competition that happened on the beach. And there was lots to learn, but you really have a respect for these artists because that's exactly what they are.
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
It was fun.
Yeah, if they have one next year, I'll have to go check it out.
There is one next year. In fact, it's the 4th of the 6th through July.
Wow.
Of July, and it'll be a little similar since last year was the first. We learned a little bit, tweak it up a little. We're going to take one day off, but still have the sculptors work so that the sculptures are more complete when you go see them. But it'll be for the 3 days, and that quicksand and the amateur competition, all of that with day-long music, that'll all still go on. So that's Sandfest 2014, July 4th through 6th.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to that. But we have to go to a break, so we'll be back with more right after this.
Depression. When this word comes to mind, rooms go quiet and heads lower.
This topic can make close friends and family blame themselves and feel as if they are the reason.
The problems, the hurt, and the pain that depression causes is like a piece of glass in the palm of one's hand.
And these problems can only hurt you if you hold on to them.
Some of us think holding on makes us strong, but sometimes
But sometimes
it is letting go.
Herman Hess.
We're moving forward. We're moving forward.
President Roosevelt signed the Bill of Rights. I've always appreciated the American Legion.
My gratitude to the American Legion.
Thank you all of the American Legion.
Well, we have millions of veterans that are members of our organization.
Thank you.
The American Legion, celebrating a legacy of service to America. Find out more at legion.org.
Welcome back to Student Connections on M6, your hometown station. Well, let's turn our attention over to the Edison Museum. So what types of things do visitors get to see there?
Well, the Edison Museum is interesting because it actually, dating back to the 1800s, is the actual depot where Thomas Edison worked during the times he lived in Port Huron, which he lived in Port Huron until he was about 13 or 14. And he was a porter on the train that went from Port Huron to Detroit every day. And one of the things he did was start to publish a little newspaper, and that was all done right in that depot. And he would sell it back on the way back and forth from Detroit. So we've taken a little bit of that and put it into the Depot Museum. We do have a printing press back from the day. And the front part of it is all dedicated to what Edison actually created, his early years, his influence of family. There's a lot of video interactive type things. We have models of his home and his parents and his sister, who are all very important to him. And interestingly, they're at Lakeside Cemetery in Port Huron. All the Edison family from that time is buried there except for Thomas, because of course he ended up in New Jersey. Yeah. But we've dedicated the Thomas Edison Depot Museum to Edison's early years, as well as we did show some of his most important patents, including phonographs, telegraph, and the light bulb.
Cool. How much is admission anyway?
Admission is $7. And again, we're open seasonally, which means that starting in June, we're open 7 days a week, 8 hours a day. And then in the few months either side, we're open weekends only, and we're closed in November, December, January, and February.
Do you guys have any new exhibits there?
We've got some new events and activities as opposed to new exhibits. That depot was actually completely redone in 2004.
Wow.
So it's just 10 years, or maybe it was 2003, sorry. So it's just 10 years old, and it does have some new technology in it. So we're doing activities. We haven't had to rebuild it yet. But it's very small and concise because it is just a train depot next to an active track, because several times a day there are still trains that go by there. So we do different activities, but we really don't have an opportunity to bring in new exhibits.
So, like, where in Port Huron is it, like, exactly, like, located?
It's directly underneath the Blue Water Bridge.
Wow.
Right in front of the new DoubleTree Hotel, which was formerly the Edison Inn. You will see this little green and burgundy building, which is the depot, and there's really no mistaking it once you see it.
Will the convention center impact any of your operations?
They will, and we don't know how yet. They haven't announced when they're starting to build, but we do know that the final plans for when the convention center is done, the facade of the convention center will be 20 feet off the depot. So that's very close. It's a very small little parking area that we'll have, but I'm hoping that that will be more than offset by increased traffic at the new convention center hotel, and of course then the depot.
Well, let's turn our attention over to the lightship now. So where is that? Is that like in the park? Like
the Huron Lightship is at the end of Prospect Street in Pine Grove Park. And for another reference, it would be right across from Port Huron Hospital. It's on the river, although it's in sand. And a lightship, the reason for the lightship was that where you had a place where you couldn't build a lighthouse, or whether it was too shallow or some other hazard, lightships were sent out and were put on station, meaning that they were anchored, and they would be another advance warning to ships back in the day that that was a very hazardous area. Now in this case, the Huron Lightship was just 6 miles north of the bridge on a place called Corsica Shoals, and that's actually just about off Lakeport, Corsica Shoals, and that was still is, incredibly shallow piece of Lake Huron. And the lightship was there for 50 years.
Wow, that's really awesome.
Well, and you at the time think about back at the time, you know, the lighting and the technology and the radios, and there was no GPS, and with the ships being so many more of them that we talked about earlier. Now there might be 1,500 or 2,000 passages a year, and back then we were talking about 6,000 a year. Ships were smaller; they were better spread out. The shipping lanes weren't as well marked. That had to be there. In fact, we talked earlier about the 1913 storm. The lightship was blown off station by miles, which really confused the freighter captains who were trying to get back to the safe harbor of the St. Clair River. So it's all connected. But the lightship actually, when it was taken off station for the last time and replaced with a permanent buoy, the city of Port Huron got a hold of it, and it sat for a while, and then the museum was asked to come in and restore it, and is actually in sand, but along the river. And it is one of the most interesting stories of all the Great Lakes is how a lightship functions.
Is there like a fee to like board it and stuff?
There is. It's the same $7 as at the depot, at the main museum, and at the lighthouse. It's all the same price. Members can always come free, but there's an amazing collection of model ships at the Huron Lightship, as well as a lot of navigational aids. We've got buoys, we've got anchors, we've got other small rescue ships. So it's very interesting. It's a very topical maritime life of the Great Lakes kind of attraction.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
It is very cool. We need to embrace our maritime heritage because there are very few places in the world like us.
And it's also very interesting with all like the ships and things.
It is. When we have new appreciation for what we see out on the river every day and take for granted.
So is the lightship open like year round?
No, it isn't. We too close November, December, January, February in the lightship. It's awfully cold. And there's no insulation other than cork on that ship, so heating is a problem too. So it's open seasonally. And again, Memorial Day to Labor Day, we're open 7 days a week.
Okay, well, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for coming in.
It has been a delight to talk to you and your viewers.
Thank you. I'm so glad you could come.
Me too. I'm delighted to tell our story.
Yeah. All right. Well, see you next time on M6, your hometown station Student Connections.